All right, I'm gonna jump in and get started here. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you taking some time out of your busy days. The purpose of this webinar really is you guys have been through a lot as business owners, franchise owners over the last 3 years, and experienced some ups and downs in the costs of goods, labor, et cetera, and obviously interest rates on top of that has been kind of a perfect storm of things that you've had to navigate through. So we thought it'd still be relevant and good content to discuss, when is it potentially a good time to refinance, and what things you should look for when refinancing. But also, hey, listen, we're at a new normal now, at least to some point. Some of you guys are looking to get into growth mode, and there might be a good time to tap into some of your equity as you're looking to try to stabilize your interest rate. So with that said, I'm Randy Jones. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at ApplePie Capital. Jamie Davis has also joined me. He's our Senior Vice President of Business Development. Been in franchising forever, mostly on the business development side. We were lucky enough to grab him on the finance side. It's kind of the perfect storm of knowledge for Jamie, kind of adding to our team. So it was a good catch for him to join us. If you don't know who I am, I've been the Chief Revenue Officer here at ApplePie Capital for about the last 7-8 years. Prior to that, I was in franchise financing in a small company that ApplePie Capital acquired. We formed that company in 1999. So I've been in franchise financing for 25 years. Even though I still look like I'm 25, made it to the hump of the 25 years. But anyway, thanks for joining. Couple housekeeping things. We want this to be interactive. So if you have a question, there's a Q&A button within Zoom. Jamie, you're going to monitor that, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, don't
If you
feel.
could use that instead of the chat, that'd be better, so we can keep it organized, and we'll reply to the questions ongoing.
All right, so I'm going to jump in here. All right. So who's ApplePie? We are dedicated to franchise finance. That's all we do, and all we've ever done since the founder started this almost 10 years ago. We're getting on our 10-year anniversary, Jamie. We funded over $2.7 billion of loans. We have products designed to accelerate growth with franchising in mind, which makes our credit box unique and our team unique, and that is all we focus on are your types of loans. So what are the key topics? Obviously, I mean, you guys have felt this. If you have a variable rate loan based on prime, I don't think it's gone down. And it's been pretty stable over the last year at 8.5%. So whatever your variable rate is, 8.5 plus X, that's where you've been for the last probably 12 months or so. We're going to dive into when is a good idea to refinance, and quite frankly, when it might not be a good idea to refinance. We're going to go through realizations and ways to tap into your equity and why it might be a good time to do that. Ultimately, what qualifications are lenders looking for? It's a tough world right now for some lenders, and so this will be more of a general discussion, not just solely focused on ApplePie and what we're looking for. And then what questions should you ask your lender, and really how to evaluate your options based on your growth objectives. All right. I'm going to spend 1 second on this for you guys to speed read through it. By the way, we will be sending this deck out too, so that way you have it as a reference guide. So I'm probably showing you something here that you've already felt, not know, but felt. So beginning in March is when interest rates really started to tick up. From March to February, they went up roughly 4.5 points. The monthly payment impact that you're probably observing right now is in the column labeled monthly payment. It's roughly $1,300 difference between March of 22 and August of 2024. And that's without even adding anything related to the spread above prime. That's just prime itself. So the difference for you is the cash in your pocket, right? You're probably servicing the debt, but you're putting less money in your pocket. And so that's some of the things that we'll cover into how you want to analyze this. So just for definitional purposes, refinance means you're just going to refinance your current debt and not take out any additional debt on top of it. Recapitalization is a refinance of your current debt plus tapping into some of the hard-earned equity that you've built into there. Dividend recap is a little bit different. The recapitalization really is for business purposes outside of recouping some of your investment. Dividend recap would be money that could go to you as shareholders, which is viewed a little differently in the funding available for that. So we wanted to call those two things out separately. So what are the benefits? Some of the obvious is optimize your existing debt. If you've borrowed from us in the past, we have two rate cards. One is for pro forma financing. The other one is for cash flow financing. Our pro forma rate card, the SBA pricing. Our cash flow rate card is roughly 200 to 250 basis points lower. If you have an SBA loan, probably based on prime, and so there's a difference, obviously, in our prime interest rate versus our cash flow rate card. Re-amortizing your loan, meaning stretching the payments to reduce the monthly payment. Jamie, I need you to wave to me if I start to cut out, because I just got a sign that said your internet connection is unstable, so I may have to shut off my camera.
So far, so good.
Other reason is free up personal assets that might be pledged as collateral against a loan, whether that's SBA or conventional. Some lenders take liens on personal assets that you might want back. Free up SBA eligibility, which for most of you probably know this, but there's an SBA cap of $5 million. And so you may want to borrow an SBA loan in the future, but you're not able to because you're up against that cap. Fixing your interest rate, eliminate balloon payments if you have them, and or just flat out simplify your life and consolidate your debt. So I'm just going to go through a couple examples here. And what I think you're going to kind of see the trend of is when you refinance, it should be a purpose. It really doesn't make sense just to refinance, meaning it might be you might be paying a 10.5% interest rate, but refinancing into a 9% interest rate might not be beneficial at the current state and time, depending on other variables that you're trying to accomplish. So each one of these kind of scenarios that I'm going to walk through here really have a purpose in mind. And that's what I really want you to understand. You should have a purpose when you attempt to do this. That way you accomplish the objective other than just lowering an interest rate. If it doesn't do much to lower the interest rate, then you got to look at the cost factor of doing that refi and does it make sense? But in this particular example, your current loan, it was $700,000, a 10-year term, monthly payments, $9,500, 6 years remaining, the outstanding principal's $500,000, and you pledged your home as collateral. So in this particular instance, you could refinance that $500,000 with a 7-year term. So I'm going to pause there and say that you could have substantially more payment savings if you were to refinance this and another term, the interest rate likely is lower on a 7-year loan, and obviously the payment's going to be lower on a 10-year loan. So really, in this particular instance, you're still saving $2,000 a month, and you're releasing your personal collateral that likely had a lien on it if you did an SBA loan. And so in this particular instance, you're with the benefits that you're getting from the 7-year loan, it might make sense to not stretch that amortization all the way out to another 10 years. Or it might be good to kind of keep the remaining amortization schedule similar to the first one. So example, the remaining term was 6 years on your first loan. This new loan's term is 7 years. And so why don't you want to stretch out the amortization too far? Is if you don't have to for cash flow purposes, you might have some needs for the business that come up at the end of your franchise agreement. A lot of franchisors require some type of reimage after 10 years. There might be some stuff that breaks and the useful life of things starts to deteriorate when you get out to another 10 years. So that might be a reason to only consider like a 1-year extension of your term.
Hey, Randy, real quick, just a couple things. One, I think probably a good idea to turn your camera off because I did get a couple of little herky-jerkies in there. And then the second, we did have a question come through. Can you clarify the difference between collateralization and personal guarantee? Because what you got the residence here and then personal guarantee on the other side of the table.
Yeah, good question. So when a lender takes a home as collateral and or marketable securities as collateral and or like an apartment building, whatever you put, they will put an actual lien against that property and or asset, which means that you can't use it. If you own a home and you wanted to get a second mortgage because you or your spouse really wanted to update your kitchen, you wouldn't be able to do that. That lien blocks you from that. And or kind of said differently, if you wanted to use that asset in a more positive way from a business perspective and tap into some of that equity to use as fuel for your businesses, it also prevents you from being able to do that. So the personal guarantee doesn't put an actual lien on the asset. It does say in the event that this loan doesn't work, then we have the right to go after you to obtain repayment. It's that is the nuanced difference in that the lien physically blocks the asset. The personal guarantee just says you're required personally to help with repayment. I don't know of a lender right now that doesn't take a personal guarantee.
So said a bit differently, there really isn't a difference in a worst case scenario, but in the interim, you have much more flexibility with the personal guarantee than you do with liened collateral.
That's correct. All right, moving on to the next scenario. So in this particular scenario, you've got original loan, 400,000, 10-year term, current payments, 450 or $5,400, 8 years remaining, remaining principals, 352, no assets pledged as collateral. So in other words, you have like right now, the SBA has several programs that are available for loans less than $500,000 where they don't require the lender to take personal assets. And or you might have a loan from a different lender where they didn't take a lien on personal assets. So this is eliminating that variable and saying, okay, what do I consider in that type of scenario? So this is a situation where the SBA lender or other lender had an interest rate of prime plus 2.25, Currently, that results in 10.75 interest rate. So in this particular example, you're actually reducing the term remaining. So again, just to circle back to the chart on the left, there's 8 years remaining on the loan on the left. You're refinancing into a 7-year loan on the right, which obviously accelerates the payoff, but it's a very similar payment. So really, in this particular instance, the use case isn't necessarily payment savings and or reducing collateral. It's more of interest rate protection and going from a variable rate loan to a fixed rate loan. And we see a lot of people that take this path again, so they're not restretching the amortization. And honestly, it gives, for a lot of people have come to us for this particular scenario because it gives them a peace of mind that over the next 7 years, their payment's not going to change. After what's happened the last 2, 3 years with their payment fluctuations, the purpose of this and the reason they like this was just they had one variable that was fixed that they could control. The other component of this also in this particular instance, but stretching this 8-year loan into a 10-year loan, I mean, the obvious benefit of that would be the interest rate would be slightly higher, but then you'd have significantly more payment savings as a result of having 3 years longer amortization. And you have less risk of some of the things that I spoke about on the previous slide about capital expenditures that could come up because you're only 2 years into your business so far. Anything to add on to that, Jamie?
No, we do have a couple of questions in the live Q&A. One, can you go after 401k or IRA as part of the personal guarantee?
No, those are protected assets.
Yeah, okay.
Without diving into that whole kind of discussion, I mean, certainly we do have situations where we recommend people using like a ROBS program, et cetera. One of the benefits of not using a ROBS program is those are protected assets. And if you use a ROBS program, you're bringing protected assets into an asset that's no longer protected. So nothing against it, it's just things to consider. So that's a good question.
Right. And the other question, which I think we'll cover later, but can you consolidate multiple loans from different lenders, i.e. smaller purchase loan and equipment loan and working capital loan? Can we consolidate those? I think you'll go over that later when we talk about recap and grow, right?
I think it's actually might even be the next slide.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
So the answer is yes, you can. This is an example of this or of that scenario that the question just was. So this person currently has 4 loans. They could be all 4 from different lenders for all that matters. So, or all the same lender, but loan 1's SBA, loan 2's SBA, loan 3's conventional, loan 4's conventional. You'll see that they have varying terms, original terms, and you'll see that they'll have varying remaining balance or term left on the loan. So in this particular instance, there's a couple takeaways on this, but I'll just focus on the bottom first. I mean, in this scenario, the remaining principal of the current loans is roughly 1,000 or 1,180,000. Those current payments total 22,000. So refinancing that debt into just a consolidation loan, it saves roughly $5,000. Whoops, sorry about that. Saves roughly $5,000 a month, but also simplify life. I think that's kind of the part of the takeaway on that. You know, there's a couple things that I will point out also. You know, if the business is healthy, some of our loans have balloon payments, and some other lenders also have balloon payments. So what does a balloon payment mean? If you're not familiar with that term, is that at the end of your initial amortization, let's say you took a 7-year loan with a 10-year amortization, there'll be a balance due in after month 84. So one of the benefits of refinancing in this particular scenario was to eliminate that balloon payment risk. And when the business is healthy and producing cash flow in these instances, then it might be a good time to take care of consolidation, reduce the interest rate, eliminate balloon payment risk. That way you're kind of cleaned up when you're ready to go to do in this particular. Assume the person likely has 4 locations open and looking to open a 5th or remodel all 4 of them. So at that point in time, it's good to clean everything up and get ready for the next piece.
As a follow-up, if I have 2 locations, each location has its own business entity, can the loans from each be consolidated into one, or is that advised?
The answer is yes, they could be consolidated into one. And that's pretty simple to do. Just both entities would be co-borrowers and ultimately consolidated into one loan, one payment. Is that a good idea to do it? You know, some of the answer kind of goes back to what your plan is, meaning you as the franchisee slash business owner and what your long-term plan is. For example, if you consolidate both locations into one loan, and then you decide to sell one of those locations, then you're going to have to coordinate with the lender of what happens to the proceeds of that sale, because the lender was counting on both locations for repayment. If you do them as 2 separate loans and you're considering selling, then ultimately when that location sells that has its own loan, the only obligation would be to pay off that loan. So it is a little nuanced, but that's a really good question. So a lot of that answer is the answer to how you structure all of your debt really kind of revolves around what is your intentions over the life of however long the loan term is.
And speaking of loan term, there's another question I think that's relevant here, which is, if you got these 4 different loans and remaining term on leases that don't necessarily match up with the refi term, are you required to go to the landlord for an extension option?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this varies by lender. Some lenders, like SBA, is a stickler for this. Some conventional lenders are flexible on this. We as ApplePie Capital have some flexibility on this. But what I would ultimately say for us as ApplePie Capital, what we would have to look at in order to waive that requirement would be what's the performance of the locations that have the correct amount of lease term, and is there enough repayment from those that we can get comfortable with the one location that's short. If all 4 locations are short in this instance, then for us as ApplePie and most lenders, you would have to look at either extending the lease or extending the options. For us, we look at the lease plus options to assess the life remaining of the lease.
Cool, thank you. And then there's one last question here in the open Q&A that's sort of a detailed question, but related to the fees. So are fees paid for refinance considered a tax deduction? Which may be a question for a tax advisor, but do you know
I would
that?
probably ask your tax advisor, but I don't think so. I think it's, I would ask your tax advisor. Obviously, the interest is a deduction. I don't know where you would expense the fees for refi, but I would definitely ask your accountant on that. Nothing else, Jamie?
Nope, not at the moment.
All right. So when is it not a good time to refi? Again, I just restate, a good time is when it has a purpose. A Probably a time where it's not um, a good benefit for you is I'm a big believer, as you kind of heard, is monthly payments are important, and also assessing what's the remaining life on your loan versus the remaining life of the asset that you have. And so when you start to refinance a a a location that has 3 years remaining in payment on your existing debt, and there's some repair, maintenance, and equipment that's potentially breaking down, I don't really consider that a good time to do a straight refinance, because you're probably going to have some capital expenditures that you're going to need to account for over the next 2 to 3 years. And so what I would advise in situations like that is making a list of the things that you need to plan for, that need to be upgraded and or replaced, and then tackling it together, because like you'll start to stack on loans again if you ultimately don't account for what you need to do over the next 2 to 3 years. The other thing, I think somebody talked about this, or the question didn't really necessarily directly correlate, but you also want to assess the cost of doing the refinance versus the benefit, and make sure that the benefit outweighs the cost. And I think that some of that is personal, and some of it's just business sense. So from a personal side, you guys have to assess the benefit. $1,000 more in your pocket a month worth the cost of paying, let's just say, a point, 2 points, 3 points in origination fee? Is that monthly payment going into your reduced monthly payment going directly into your pocket worth it? I can't answer that. That's you guys personally in your personal situation. All right. So benefits of a recapitalization. We'll show you how this is calculated, etc. Jamie's going to play a video for you here in a second, but we're just going to pause here and let you ponder what this screen says for a second. Because I don't think a lot of people know that they can do this. So you've worked hard, your business is generating cash flow. The value of your business is more than you owe on the business, so you have some equity. Same thing as a home. Your home's worth more than you owe, you have equity. So does your business. And there's ways to tap into that. That's what a recapitalization is. The use cases for this, typically new locations. Like a lot of people have some equity, enough equity to finance a whole new location out of their recap loan, acquisitions, down payments. So in other words, you don't have enough equity to put into your to finance in its entirety a new location, but you want to preserve some liquidity. So you can use a recap loan for down payment. I've kind of talked a few times about remodel, reimaging, and planning for that. Working capital and dividend recaps are not other use cases for this. So at a high level, how does it work? I've kind of talked through the bullet points below, but your EBITDA is 200,000. The multiple that the value, let's just say, is 4.5 times that 200,000. Your borrowing base, meaning 200,000 times 4.5 is 900,000. You owe $500,000 in an outstanding debt. So in that situation, you'd have $400,000 to use for all the things I referenced on the previous slide and at the bottom of this slide. So you have $400,000 of lendable equity outside of what you currently owe, which is a good feeder for all the aforementioned use cases. And Jamie, I'll turn it over. You're the
Okay.
pro at this part, but I'm not very good at it.
All right, I'll get it. Here we go.
You're ready to level up the growth of your franchise empire. You know this will require opening new units, acquiring existing ones, and doing necessary upgrades. But you want to keep some cash reserves on hand. It's hard to get a loan, and you're not growing as fast as you'd like. ApplePie Capital is a franchise-focused financing partner with a guided recap and grow program designed for franchisees looking to quickly expand their business. And unlike many lenders that typically require cash up front, we empower franchisees with the opportunity to borrow directly against the equity in their existing units to grow. By leveraging that hard-earned equity, you can open or acquire your next units with no cash out of pocket and no liens on personal assets. And as equity continues to build across your units, it's a strategy you can repeat again and again to preserve current cash reserves and increase liquidity along the way. Use it for new units or acquisitions. Unit upgrades. And ultimately, large-scale expansion. Unlock your next level of growth with a recap and grow strategy through ApplePie Capital.
Turn it back over to you, Randy.
Thank you, Jamie.
We had a question come in during the video. How do we get to the 4.5 times multiple? So meaning it's 4.5 times the EBITDA. I guess how do we determine that?
Sorry, I got distracted trying to reshare my screen.
There you go.
So how do you get to the 4.5 times EBITDA? So that's a ratio that we as ApplePie use. So that 4.5 times is what we use to calculate all the numbers that I just showed you. So that's an implied value, if you will. Now, every franchise concept trades differently, so it's not necessarily a valuation, if you will, on your particular situation. So the 4.5 times is a number that we use that's kind of somewhere in the middle of what you would expect most franchises value at. And then ultimately that 4.5 times is just your current EBITDA. So if you had a different example, if in your situation, if you had $100,000 in EBITDA, you'd multiply that EBITDA times 4.5. That would give you a $450,000 borrowing base. And then you just subtract off the debt. Does that make sense? Did I answer that clearly? You can post another question in the chat if that, or in the Q&A if that didn't answer your question. Okay. So what do you need to look at when you're doing a refinance or a recapitalization? So loan covenants, one thing you need to consider, an SBA loan is likely the safest loan that you're going to get, other than, like we talked about, a lien on your personal residence. Really, there are no covenants in an SBA loan. They do have requirements to supply financial information, but they don't have like a debt service coverage ratio, covenant, etc. So bottom line is make sure you understand the covenants. You need to consider what are the prepayment penalties. I purposely put this in here where it says or full payout loans. That might be a term that you've never heard before, but some finance companies would tell you that you don't have prepayment penalties, which is likely accurate, but there's no benefit to paying it off early. So in other words, think of a car lease. If you lease a car that has $100 a month in car payments and you signed up for a 36-month lease, and after month 20 you wanted to pay it off, you're still going to pay 16 months times $100 or $1,600. So just read the fine print, understand the prepayment penalties, understand the term, if it's a full payout loan, or said differently, is there a benefit to paying it off early for you? There's also some things in here like cross-corporate guarantees. By refinancing, does it then turn into a cross-corporate guarantee that you may or may not be comfortable with? Personal guarantees, like I mentioned, I haven't seen any lenders recently that are doing many loans without personal guarantees. We can offer in some instances where the personal guarantee burns off when certain ratios are met, but it's pretty unusual. You also have to look at, are there any additional indebtedness costs? Meaning prohibition, sorry. And then lastly, what are the costs? And I think the question earlier that was posed addresses bullet point 2 in this list is, there's a cost with respect to potentially timing, getting a landlord waiver. Most lenders require at least access to the space for the lender to be able to obtain the equipment in the event of default. And so probably need landlord waivers to be refreshed and potentially realign the leases with the term of the loan. That might come at a cost. So you kind of want to make sure you evaluate these things as you're kind of moving through the process. So a couple things that I've seen in my days is some lenders have agreements that say you can't borrow any other money other than coming to us and we have to approve all of it. So in other words, you have a loan with a lender, probably a sizable loan if you have this type of covenant, and you have to do $8,000 re-image. Like they need to sign off on your ability to go and do those upgrades and replace the equipment. So not saying that's good or bad. If you're healthy, then ultimately it's a good scenario, but just make sure you understand it really is the point. There is a difference between a loan versus an operating lease. And most people that do remodels would do what's called an equipment finance agreement that typically is counted like a loan on your balance sheet, debt schedule. An operating or capital lease is actually expensed on your P&L. So just make sure you double check that you're able to do both if possible, or what are the limitations. And then obviously refinancing, if your goal is to grow, refinancing with a lender that want to take your refi and throw you to the corner probably isn't the person you want to align with. So make sure that that lender aligns with what you want to do moving forward. So what are lenders looking for? I won't read this to you, but basically they want to make sure that you have enough cash flow to make the payment and then some. You're not so cash strapped in liquidity that you don't have any ability to survive in case of something odd happening. FICO score, credit score 700, and ultimately your personal obligations are met by your income. So they're going to look at your credit report and just double check that the income, inclusive in personal and business, is sustainable. One thing that I'll just reference, I don't have a list of all the people that are on the call, but I have a list of the people who signed up for the call and did notice some of the brands that were there. So some brands had the positive COVID effect In other words, you had a nice bump of sales because your business model was attractive during COVID, and then ultimately had a little downward trend post-COVID. Just be prepared to provide explanations if the sales trends are going down, and making sure that they're stabilized, right? And so if your sales trends went down a little bit, make sure that you're able to speak to what you've done to address the EBITDA and show that that's stabilizing. And so I think being willing to explain downward trends in either sales and or EBITDA margins, and showing that they've stabilized, especially in today's environment, I think that's probably doing your homework and being able to provide that explanation in advance is helpful. I think lender out there, making sure that you're able to represent that you're comfortable that these have stabilized.
Randy, we do have a question. I think it makes sense to go back to the third bullet there on clean books, because we had somebody ask, when calculating EBITDA for purposes of the multiple, do you use what is submitted for tax purposes, which might be done to do as much as possible to legally show low EBITDA and save in taxes, which, to your point here, your accountant in this case isn't always going to be your best friend.
Yeah. Aside from the refi conversation, and probably just more focused, and I think that question was related more to the recap conversation. And I'm gonna actually take it another different way also. If you're looking to sell, whether you're looking to grow or you're looking to sell, having clean books and records representing EBITDA on tax returns is my best recommendation that I can give you. Certainly take advantage of the amortization, take advantage of the depreciation, take advantage of the interest, but be careful with writing off your family, extended family, and everybody and their brother's cell phone bill, 7 car payments, etc. Certainly there's logical and good business expenses, not discouraging you from using those as tax deductions. But when you're looking to grow and or looking to sell, your borrowing base or selling base is going to be at a multiple of EBITDA, no matter who you go with. And so you have to just be careful that and Jamie said it perfectly, sometimes your accountant's not your friend. And have an end in mind. Like if your goal is to sell 3 years from now, I would start showing as much profit on your taxes today. If your goal is to grow and add locations within the next 2 years, I would also start today. Because they'll do a look back and it'll look weird that with the same sales, it went from 20% EBITDA margin to 35% EBITDA margin. So they will ask questions. It will be a smoother, easier process.
Yeah, and more questions related to that particular math problem. Actually, one comment, Corbett Harris mentioned that some lenders go up to 3.5 times, and we go up to 4.5, which is one of the higher ones. So thanks for mentioning that, Corbett. And then the other question related to the multiple really is, how can we take over distressed businesses with very little or no cash flow due to the failure of ownership? But we do know, as an experienced owner, we can turn it around and grow as well, which is a great question. Just again, with that math problem, can be difficult.
Yeah, really good question. In fact, Corbett, nice. Sorry, my camera's not on, but I'm waving hello to you. Thanks for being a loyal customer. We appreciate you. We've actually helped quite a few people that are in this instance that was just described, where you have underperforming locations that you'd like to acquire. Those locations themselves don't really show any ability to repay a loan, so therefore it's hard to get a loan. I would say there's several different types of people that this conversation applies to. So as a first-time franchisee trying to buy a location like this, it's pretty tough. Quite frankly, probably going to have to pay cash. If it's an existing franchisee with 3 to 4 locations open that have proven that ultimately they can run those businesses with consistent margins across the 3 or 4 locations that they're open, then ultimately you can make adjustments in the expense side of the businesses that are acquiring. So in other words, if the sales side is solid, but the expense side is out of whack because the seller doesn't know what the heck they're doing to operate it, you as a proven business owner have demonstrated you know how to operate the margins and to certain margins and are clean, then adjustments can be made to account for how you would operate it as the owner. Other instances, like you could also apply to 3 or 4 unit owner if this applies, but larger business owners that I've seen actually have this as a strategy and do really well, they'll use like the recap and grow program to borrow money from their existing businesses and then just pay for the new locations without any lien on it. So you just use your existing business to pay for the new ones. So those are 3 different, obviously diverse scenarios, but I would say the hardest one to do is when you're unproven operator, 1 or 2 unit and or new operator looking to buy a couple or 1 underperforming locations. Those are challenging for most lenders.
Really good question.
Any other questions in there, Jamie?
Nope, not right now. Clean slate.
All right, perfect. Okay. I think ultimately there's a couple ways to reach out to us. Again, without seeing who is exactly on this call, all of our brands have relationship managers assigned to them. If you've previous borrower, you could go back to your relationship manager that you've worked with in the past. Could obviously email us at loans@ApplePie Capital. We will be sending a follow-up email out to y'all with the presentation. And Judah, I like your dog, but he can't see if he's talking. Do we also send a copy of the recording?
Yes, we'll send a link out, an email with the link to the recording out.
Perfect. All right, well, this is a link to another link, another way to access or reach out to us. So that'll also be in the deck if you want to take a screenshot of it all. We appreciate your time. Thank you for spending the last 40, 50 minutes with us and hopefully get a chance to work together in the future.
Thanks, everybody. Great question.